and maximize this presentation. And you should see there's a QA button at the, I believe at the bottom of your screen. So if at any point during the presentation, if you have questions, please feel free to type them in. We may not see them in the moment, but we're definitely going to get to them at the end. But today we're going to talk about the senior timeline, kind of some things that you should be thinking about throughout these next months. So I'll be talking about the late summer, early fall, and then my colleagues will go into the late fall, winter time, December and April, and then we'll see if we have some time to talk about our colleges at the end and have some time for questions. But before we talk, I just want to tell you a little bit about who this organization is. So we represent ARROW, the Association for Regional Representatives of Oregon and Washington. And basically, we're a bunch of admissions counselors who represent different universities around the country. It doesn't have to only be in the Pacific Northwest. And our universities have made the investment in making us regional counselors. So we're mostly located in the Northwest or on the West Coast, and usually in your time zone, and we are there for you. Our contact information is on our website, and so we encourage you to reach out and find other ARROW members and find representatives who are in your time zone and can talk to you and work with you throughout the admissions process. So first, I want to talk about some things to keep in mind, right now in the summer and through the beginning of the fall. So the first big thing that we should just get out of the way are the SATs and ACTs. I know that this is kind of a stressful topic right now because of COVID-19 and test dates have been pushed back. I want to emphasize that you certainly do not have to take the SATs or ACTs. There are a lot of colleges and universities that either have been test optional or are going to be test optional this admission cycle because of COVID-19. But, if you want to take the test or if you want to retake the test, if you haven't done so yet, now is really the time to be doing that if you're in your senior year. So for example, I put this little chart here to show you that if you were to take the SAT, let's say on September 23rd, it would take all the way until October 26th for those scores to get released to the colleges. So if you're applying to schools that have an application deadline in early November, you really want to make sure that you're taking the test as soon as possible so those scores get in. But as I mentioned before, many of the colleges are willing to work with you on these test scores. Even certain programs that in the past have been required, oftentimes we're going to be flexible this year because of COVID-19. And so we definitely encourage you to reach out. For schools that are test optional, I think kind of the rule of thumb of should you submit your SAT, should you not, is see if you can find the averages for that college and university. See what their averages were last year, and then see where your tests fall. If you are kind of right around the average or higher, feel free to submit those scores. It really can't hurt, but if you are a little bit below those averages, then no pressure to submit if it's a test optional university. I think in general, that's a good rule of thumb. But another person to ask is your school counselor, because especially if you're applying to a college or university that traditionally requires test scores and is a place where a lot of students from your school are applying, you'll be able to have a good idea of where your averages fall among your classmates as well. So those are some tips that I would say to check out about the SAT or the ACT. Another thing to be doing senior year, if you haven't done so already, right now, this time in August, is to finalize your college essays. So whether you are applying to common application schools, coalition application colleges, state-specific schools, different state universities that have their own essay prompts. Usually you can find those online. So, if you just Google, for example, the common application and the essay prompts, you can find out what they are. And now is the time to kind of get that out of the way. If you think about the application as a whole, all the different sections, usually the essay is the most time-consuming part of the application. And so if you can get that out of the way, it's going to make the whole thing much simpler. And we actually have an arrow presentation from our group coming up on the 18th at 1 p.m. about how to write the college essay. So we definitely encourage you to check that out. This is also a good time to identify who you want your letter of recommendation writers to be. You definitely want to give that person plenty of time to write the letter for you. So if your application is due November 1st, you don't want to ask them October 25th. You want to try to give at least 2 weeks notice. A lot of colleges, if they do require letters of recommendation, usually at least one will come from your counselor. But if you are able to submit another one, it usually comes from a teacher. And so if you want to think about, teachers that know you, but more importantly, are able to speak to your ability to do well in college. Sometimes students ask, should I choose a teacher where I got an A in the subject? That's fine, but sometimes it's almost more interesting to choose a teacher where maybe you didn't have quite as high a grade, but the teacher can really speak about how you worked for that grade. To me, it's, as an admissions counselor, I'm really impressed by a student that, let's say, gets a B in a class, but they had to work really hard to get that B, and the teacher's able to talk about all of the extra hours they put into studying and the time they took to go to office hours and those kinds of things. Another tip for this is we suggest creating a resume, because even if your school doesn't require that, it's just kind of a nice way to organize your thoughts about, what do you want to tell colleges? What are the most important activities that you've participated in high school, and some meaningful things about yourself? Summing that into a hopefully one-page document. And then that's something you can hand to your recommenders to kind of jog their memories about some special qualities about your interests or your grades or whatever that may be. And we encourage you to send a thank you note to your recommenders as well, because teachers and counselors are taking their time to write these letters for you. And that's always a nice thing to do, is send a thank you note in the end. And then, right now, and we'll talk more about this later, but, you're starting to form your large college list. Maybe you're narrowing down your colleges to a shorter list. So it's now is a good time to start thinking about how you're going to interact with those colleges, how you're going to get a better sense of, is this the right fit for you? You might not want to book trips or visit colleges all the way across the country before you're admitted. That might come a little later for you, but you can go on the website, start checking out visit opportunities. A lot of colleges are offering workshops and webinars and one-on-one meetings and opportunities to connect with current students. And I think that will be a help to you. And then also, once COVID tamps down and local colleges are allowing visitors, that's also a nice way to kind of get a sense of, do I want a large school or a small school? You can kind of visit some of those local options and then see if further away options are a good fit for you. And then this probably is one of the most important pieces of advice that I can give. If you're walking down the hallway and you see your college counselor, your guidance counselor coming towards you, if you were to wave and they wave back, ask yourself, do they know my name? Would they wave back and say, hello, Nick, or whatever your name is? If your counselor doesn't know your name, get in there, try to schedule a meeting with them, be proactive. This is really where you can advocate for yourself. A lot of high school counselors have big caseloads. They have hundreds of students that they are working with. And sometimes they don't always have the time to really get to know every student super well. I think, many counselors do, but this is really an opportunity for you to make sure, if you're not hearing from your counselor, to reach out to them and make sure that you set up an appointment to talk about your college plan and your interests, because they're the ones that really understand your classmates and where you're coming from in your school. And that's going to give you some better ideas about the kind of schools that you may want to apply to, or what your chances are of applying to those schools. So be a self-advocate there. But next up, we're going to have Palmer tell you about forming your college list.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Nick. A lot of what I'm going to say in the next couple of minutes overlaps with what Nick said, just in terms of how you approach things, the new timeline and so on. One of the challenges you all face is that there's over 2,300 four-year colleges and universities in the US. And then on top of that, you've got community colleges and international schools and trade schools. So it really can be overwhelming. And what we're going to try and do in the next few minutes is help you begin to narrow the list down to a more manageable number. Before I do that, I wanted to mention one thing you'll want to do is just keep in mind the question of schools, colleges, accreditation. And this is an area that's a little bit foreign maybe to most students. Accreditation is kind of like the good housekeeping seal of approval. And there are some different kinds. And just in the interest of being brief, I'll say the gold standard is what's called regional accreditation. There is also national accreditation, and that can be fine. But regional accreditation typically is what you're looking for. And for instance, in the Northwest, colleges and universities that are regionally accredited are accredited by the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities. In California, it would be the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. In Arizona, in the Midwest, it's the Higher Learning Commission. You don't need to know all that. Just keep in mind that typically you want to go to a regionally accredited school because the classes, the credits, the degrees are going to be more broadly accepted. Nick, you want to hit the next slide for me? So here's just some questions you'll want to ask yourself. Some of these will not apply to every single one of you. Figure out which ones are important. One of the first questions is, do you want to go to a public university or a private college or university or a proprietary school? Public universities and colleges are those that are supported by your tax dollars. And if you go to a school within your state, then they typically will be a lower cost option for you. Private colleges don't receive direct support in the form of tax dollars. So they often will be more expensive on the front end, and yet they often have excellent financial aid that can help to close the gaps. Proprietary is just a big fancy word that means it's a for-profit school that's being run as a business. Probably one of the best known proprietary schools or for-profit schools is University of Phoenix. But also, for instance, if you look at something like your local cosmetology college, that would be a proprietary school. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. One thing I would mention, though, is that often the programs you might find at those schools would be available to you at a lower cost through possibly your community college or maybe your local public university. The next item on here is one that when I started talking about this stuff with students years ago, I had pretty far down the list, and it keeps moving its way up for me. And that is, where do you want to live? Do you want to go far away? Like, how far away can you possibly get? Or are you more of a homebody? You feel more secure? Or even just being able to come home for a 3-day weekend? And then related to that, would you like to be going to college in a major metropolitan area, in a smaller community, a little quieter place? What fits your personality that way? What do you want to major in? What fields of study or career fields interest you? This used to be at the very top of the list for me. Okay, that's the first question you have to answer. And I've come to realize it's important, but actually most students change their college major several times. That's a typical part of even just, you go to school and you begin to get a better handle on what your interests and your strengths are. So if you're interested in engineering, obviously the colleges that you narrow your list down should offer good engineering programs, but don't focus in just on that. Look at the overall strengths of the school. I think size is an important thing to consider. And this is a very personal thing. I went to one of the smallest colleges in the whole Northwest when I went to school. Meanwhile, one of my best friends who went to the same high school with me went to one of the biggest universities in the Northwest. If we had traded places, I think probably we both would have been unhappy. So think about what the pros and cons are of different sizes of institutions and how you'll thrive in each type. When I talk about student profile, this is something that Nick kind of touched on when he talked about SAT scores. This is going to be a little bit more difficult in this year's environment where a lot of schools aren't even looking at SAT and ACT scores. But you may, for instance, want to look at the colleges you're considering and check what's their average freshman incoming GPA, or what was the middle 50th percentile of high school GPAs for the students they admitted. And so, for instance, let's say that the school you're looking at has the middle 50th percentiles from 3.5 to 3.9 GPA, and you have a 2.9. You might then from that be able to draw some conclusions about how likely it is that you would be admitted there, or maybe how challenging you might find, how competitive you might find the academic environment to be. This also could be something in terms of profile where you might be looking at, is this a school that has a religious focus, if your faith is important to you? Or I saw in the question and answers, someone mentioned military benefits. Is it a military-friendly campus? That type of thing can also be part of the profile. There's also probably a countless number of other factors that different students care about. That might be things like, where can you go and be involved with sports? Or perhaps it might be something like, where are your friends going? It's okay to take that into account. Don't just follow your best friend to college, but sometimes it's comforting to be able to go to school with someone that you know. So just consider those things that just are maybe kind of random to you. And then the last thing I'll mention on this slide is affordability. And this is something that's kind of hard to get a handle on up front. What I'm getting at right now is, as you make your lists of colleges that might fit you, recognize that financial circumstances for your family can change, sometimes very unpredictably, especially in the current environment. So I would encourage you to make sure that at least one school you choose is one that you know can meet your needs, but also you know you can afford even if financial aid isn't available and your family can't help you like you expected. Nick, can I have the next slide? So now that you've kind of answered those questions and you can begin to sort of get a picture of what kind of school you're looking for, now you have to sort of figure out, how do I find schools that match up with me? And I mentioned them on an earlier slide, or I showed on an earlier slide, you want to start early. This is a picture of my daughter getting a very early start on her college search. And this year in particular, a lot of this is going to be done online, not in person. First off here, one tool you can use is college fairs, which are basically gatherings of many colleges in one location, so you can kind of window shop. Two that are coming up that are credible for you, the national college fairs put on by NACAC. We'll have about 600 universities at each one, and there's 4 or 5 of them coming up this fall. And then PNACAC, which is our regional organization, will also be doing some smaller fairs throughout the fall that you can check out. Colleges will be coming from mostly the Northwest, but all over the country for those. There's also some great websites you can go to. With some of these websites, you're able to answer a few questions, the location, the majors, and so on, and then they will prioritize for you based on what they think, colleges that might fit you the best. One thing to recognize is that a lot of these schools, a lot of these websites will ask you for your information, so be aware that they may then sell that information to colleges or scholarship services and so on to get in touch with you. Nothing wrong with that, but just be aware. And then the last thing, and I'll shut up and pass it along to Haley, is your college counselor, your college and career counselor at your high school is a fantastic resource. They know the schools well, they probably know you well, and they can play matchmaker for you. So Haley, it's all yours.
Awesome, thanks Palmer. So some awesome information coming from Nick and Palmer. I know it's a lot of information though, and there's probably a lot of you that have a lot of schools that you're interested in. We work with students that, just apply to 1 or 2 institutions. And then we have students that, want to apply to 40 to 50 schools. And if that is, depending on what category you fall in, no matter what, we recommend you making a spreadsheet. This is going to help you narrow down the schools that you're taking you from the schools that you're interested in into the schools you're actually going to apply to. So I just made up a mock spreadsheet showing a variety of schools throughout the United States. Like Palmer said, you're going to want to ask yourself a lot of questions. Do you want to be in state or out of state? Do you want to be super close to home? Do you want to be able to drive home on the weekend to do laundry? Or are you okay with taking a 5-6 hour flight with a couple different connections? Think about the majors that you're interested in. Like Palmer said, we know you're going to change your mind. About 80% of college students in the United States go to school undecided. So that's totally okay if you don't have a really solid idea yet. You're going to want to look at the school size. Is it urban? Is it rural? The acceptance rate, if it's public, private, just to kind of get a better idea of what you envision when it comes to school. If you want to be in an urban area in the hustle and bustle of a city, I'm going to be honest, Washington State University in Pullman probably isn't going to be your best bet. We're a small college town, so then you can cross that right off your list. Now, the next, spreadsheet right underneath is showing kind of like crossing those schools off your list. So I based this off of a student based in Seattle, which is where I'm based out of. Hypothetically, this student wants to go out of state to a private institution. So that allowed us to cross off all the in-state schools and then the out-of-state schools that are public. And then from there, that's going to help you narrow down what schools you actually want to apply to. So you're not sending out 50 applications when in all reality, only 10 of them match the demographic of school that you're looking for. Nick, we can go to the next slide. Perfect. So then this is kind of taking us into the fall. So all of that you're going to want to think about is pretty much now until October. And October is a huge month for college. This is when you're really going to want to start submitting applications if you haven't already done so. We recommend connecting with your personal admissions counselor. So like myself, Nick, and Palmer, we're all regionally based admissions counselors. So if you're interested in any of our schools, you would reach out to someone like us. We can set up a one-on-one, face-to-face over Zoom, or if you would prefer a phone call. Maybe if COVID ever goes away, we can go get a cup of coffee. But just make sure that you're connecting with your personal admissions counselor, because they're going to be able to give you all of the very important details that can easily be overlooked. Chances are you're going to be getting a lot of emails from a lot of different schools. So it's super easy to confuse dates and deadlines. So on this slide, you'll see another spreadsheet. So this is another hypothetical student. They decided that they have narrowed it down to 4 schools that they want to apply to: Salve Regina, Seton Hall, Alaska Fairbanks, WSU Pullman. Oddly enough, those are the 4 admissions counselors that worked on this presentation. So it's important to see that we're all rolling admission. So what does rolling admission actually mean? Rolling admission means that when you apply, you will be able to receive a decision probably within a couple weeks to 3 to 6 weeks is the typical school, where you're not having to wait to a certain date to receive your decision. So at a school like WSU Pullman, you apply, you'll hear back in about 3 to 6 weeks, where a school that is not rolling admission would be the University of Washington, Seattle. Basically, what they do is they take all of their applications. I believe their deadline is going to be around November 15th, and then you'll hear back in March. Every student at the same time will see their acceptance, their wait list, or their denial from UW. So it's important to have a good idea of when exactly you're going to be getting that decision. But then before you even are going to be accepted, you're going to want to keep in line the early action dates, the regular decision dates, priority deadlines. We all use different words and different names. Higher ed has some weird jargon, and we don't expect you to understand it all. So by all means, don't hesitate to reach out to us and ask questions. You know, at a school like Alaska Fairbanks and WSU Pullman, we have priority deadline. That basically means that you are going to want to apply by February 15th and January 31st for scholarship and FAFSA purposes. However, you'll see Salve Regina and Seton Hall, those deadlines are going to be a little bit earlier. And every school has a different understanding of their deadlines and whether it's a hard deadline or whether they have flexibility. So like at Alaska Fairbanks, you can actually apply after the regular decision date. However, there will be an extra fee associated with that application. So you're just gonna wanna make sure that you have all these dates straight so you're not missing any important dates. And that's going to include FAFSA. So FAFSA is basically an application for governmental funding. There is loans and there are grants associated with FAFSA. And most institutions are going to want you to file your FAFSA sooner rather than later. FAFSA is going to open up October 1st. And as you'll see on this slide that our 4 schools have slightly different deadlines / recommended deadlines. So at a school like WSU Pullman, we will accept FAFSA applications after that March 15th recommended deadline. However, you may lose out on some cool grants. And grants are very similar to scholarships. You don't have to pay them back, where loans you do. But I'm only an admissions counselor. Unfortunately, I'm not a financial aid specialist. So be sure to join our team tomorrow night for financial aid basics. It'll be a presentation just like this from 4 to 5 p.m. So super helpful. Don't let FAFSA feel daunting or don't let it be scary, because it can be super simple. Just take your time going through it. And again, touching base with your personal admissions counselor to make sure that we actually receive your FAFSA at the school that you're interested in applying to. And then scholarships. Scholarships are a great way to get funding for school. Personally, I recommend scholarship Sundays. Maybe every Sunday, every other Sunday, when you wake up, or midday, whenever you want to do it. I just recommend taking a day to fill out scholarships, multiple days. Because I'm not telling you this to scare you or bum you out, but for every 1 scholarship application, for every 50 scholarship applications a student submits, the national average is that that student will only receive 1. So getting a scholarship can be kind of difficult if you aren't going out of your way to fill out different applications. And when it comes to scholarships, be sure to use your resources and use your connections. And then Nick, we can go to the next slide and I'll explain exactly what those resources and connections are. So first of all, chat with your high school counselor and then chat with your personal admissions counselor. There are a lot of high schools that have either their own scholarships or the city that they're located has scholarships designated for their specific students. They're also going to have a lot of really great resources for you. They're going to have different websites that are going to help you find scholarships. Now, also talk with your personal admissions counselor. So all of us here are going to have a general idea of the different scholarships that we offer at our schools. Now, all of our institutions probably have more scholarships than we even know exist. So be sure that you're checking out the financial aid websites as well. A lot of financial aid websites, they're not only going to list the specific scholarships at the institution, however, they'll also link some websites for some outside scholarships like I have on this slide. If you want to take a moment, maybe take a picture of this slide, because these are some really great websites to go to find different scholarships for college. And again, take your time filling these out. And also the scholarships that take more time, so the scholarships that require essays, the scholarships that require interviews or letters of recommendation, less students are going to apply to those simply because it takes more time. So those are definitely going to be some good ones to really gear towards and to really go after, because the more detailed the scholarship is, the less likely students are to apply for that scholarship. And then when it comes to two things that you're not going to want to do for scholarships, never pay for a scholarship application and never pay to receive a scholarship. There's absolutely no reason for you to pay to receive money. And then never give out your social security number on a scholarship application unless it's tied through your FAFSA or directly to your institution and you know 100% that it's a legit scholarship. Unfortunately, there are a lot of scams that come with scholarships now, and we don't want you to get scammed out of your money or have your identity stolen just by trying to pay for school, okay? So again, use your resources, talk with your high school counselor, talk with us admissions counselors. We have so many great resources for you, and we want to give you money. There are hundreds of thousands of dollars in the US that go ungranted just because students aren't applying to a lot of different scholarships that are readily available for them. Okay, we can go to the next slide, Nick. Perfect. So now you have decided what schools you're going to apply to. You've met with your admissions counselor. What's next? So December through April, it's kind of like your action plan. So this is when the regular decision for application and deadlines are going to be, and the financial aid and scholarship deadlines. So again, every institution is going to have those different dates that are super important for you to remember, because a lot of schools, their deadlines are hard deadlines. If their application closes at 11:59 p.m. and you try and submit it at 12:02 a.m., it's not going to go through and you missed out and they're going to make you apply for the next semester. So just make sure that you're hitting those deadlines. Do not wait for the night before it's due. You saw Nick's slide earlier with the ACT and SAT tests. Just because you took it on December 5th, we're not going to get that until at least January 5th. So there is some time that it takes for us to receive documents and also process them. And we understand that the SAT and ACT, a lot of testing sites are closed right now, which is why most institutions are either test optional or are getting rid of tests altogether. If you are going to a school and you notice that they're still requiring that test, touch base with your personal admissions counselor and see if you can figure something else out for that. And then a lot of schools also have early decision deposits. So the earlier you apply at most institutions, the earlier you'll find out if you got accepted. And for those students, once you're accepted, that allows you to apply for housing. That allows you to apply for more scholarships. So getting that application in and making that decision earlier, it's going to make your senior year a lot less stressful. So definitely take the time now to get all your ducks in a row, get all your applications out there, so then you can get that early decision deposit in, because that may give you a better housing option or more scholarships. We can go to the next one. Oh, thanks, Nick. So then February through May. So we're kind of overlapping here. So this is reviewing financial aid and really making your decision. So most institutions are going to release financial aid packages from February to March, which again, that's why it's important to submit that FAFSA to make sure that you are meeting those deadlines and possibly receiving university scholarships or grants that are linked through FAFSA. FAFSA isn't mandatory for most institutions. However, we all highly recommend it simply because a lot of financial aid grants and scholarships do filter through FAFSA. If you have any family income changes, I know right now we're in an absolutely insane time, and family incomes are changing constantly. Institutions are relatively flexible with that. They'll allow you to submit a special circumstances form or allow you to refile that FAFSA or recalculate it. Let's see here. I would recommend visiting campuses, as early as you can. Unfortunately, a lot of campuses aren't actually giving tours right now, but go and check out their website, see if there are any virtual tours happening. Go on YouTube, check out the different videos that they post, possibly student vlogs that attend there. There's a lot of really great ways to still get to know a campus and get a feel for a campus without physically being there. So keep that in mind. Again, touch base with your admissions counselor. We'll be able to give you a better idea of what each institution is doing, so you can see if it's a final candidate. And then deposit deadline. Most schools are going to have a deposit deadline of May 1st, where that is where you need to make that final decision of this is 100% where I want to go. Again, not every school has a May 1st deadline, but there are a good majority that have that May 1st deadline. Some will allow you to make a deposit or confirm your enrollment after May 1st, but there are a lot that have that hard deadline. So I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but again, touch base with your personal admissions counselor, because we'll be able to tell you exactly what dates and deadlines are important for us at our specific school. Awesome.
Hey, Haley, could we bounce back to that? I wanted to make a comment about the very first point there about the financial aid packages.
Yes.
Financial aid packages, to someone who's never looked at these things before, can be a little bit confusing. I'll just tell you a very quick story. My son was interested in going to a particular school in Texas. I told my wife, there's no way we can afford it. We applied for financial aid. I get a phone call from her saying, you were wrong. We just got his financial aid package and it covers everything. And I was quite surprised. And I said, read the financial aid package to me. And as it turned out, there was about $20,000 in student loans there. And, you just have, so talk with your counselor at school, even talk with your college admissions counselor like us. Just make sure you understand what you're seeing in the various financial aid packages from various schools.
If I could add on to that too, there's a resource, I believe it's called the College Scorecard, offered by the federal government, because there is no standard way that colleges are required to sort of frame their financial aid letters. So, some colleges may sort of put things like loans and money that you have to pay back, and they might kind of loop that in with, oh, this is your total package and the total amount, making it seem like that's what you're actually going to pay that year, or the money that you're given that you don't have to pay back. So there's some resources where you can take these different packages, plug in the numbers, put them into essentially like a spreadsheet so you can compare them in a more consistent way among the colleges. And that's another thing that will probably come up in that financial aid presentation as well. But feel free to ask us and we can send that link to you too. So at this point, I think we have some time to speak a little bit about the institutions that we represent, and then we're going to have some time for questions and answers. So I think if we can all take, somewhere between 1 and 2 minutes just to give you a brief overview of our institutions. Palmer, if you want to begin.
Sure. Hey, all you need to know is if you want to do something really adventurous, University of Alaska Fairbanks is the place for you. Probably especially for students who are interested in the sciences, but we have over 100 different areas of study. A smaller university, about 8,000 students, small class sizes. And one of the nice things for those of you who are in Oregon and Washington and Idaho, for instance, is we offer the Western Undergraduate Exchange to all students from the Northwest, which brings your tuition down by about $15,000 a year.
Thanks, Palmer. So I'll tell you a little bit about Salve Regina University. If you're wondering what our name means, it means Hail Holy Queen in Latin. It's part of a Catholic prayer because we're founded by the Sisters of Mercy. They were, in their time, known as radical nuns or the walking nuns. People that would go out into the community, and they really wanted to break cycles of poverty and educate people regardless of their background and their privilege. And so we were really founded in that spirit of promoting a transformative student experience in an environment that's very inclusive and welcoming and open to all. And we want students to kind of question and learn how to think about the world and hear very different viewpoints. But it's a really caring and nice community. We're a small campus, 2,400 students, just an hour from the big city, Boston, and Boston and Logan Airport, so you could do a direct flight and then drive 40 minutes down. Or we have a little local regional airport about 25 minutes from the campus as well. We have a number of programs, but a couple that I want to mention that are kind of stand out are our cultural and historic preservation major, where students learn about the built environment and how to advocate for, restore, protect, preserve historic objects, buildings, and even neighborhoods. So it's a really neat program. We have Division III sports, really involve students, rugby, sailing. I could go on and on, but I don't want to keep you too long. So I encourage you to go to our Admissions Arrow website, admissionsarrow.com, and you can find some basic stats on our universities, but also our contact information if you don't see it here, and we can always get in contact and talk more.
Perfect. So my name's Haley, and I'm from WSU Pullman. Washington State University has 6 different campuses. However, Pullman is going to be the largest and residential campus. It's located in Southeast Washington, so it's going to be about a 5-hour drive from the Seattle area. However, we do have a small regional airport, and if you fly out of Seattle, it's a 45-minute flight, so not bad at all. About 21,000 students. We are a Division I school, Pac-12. We are a Tier 1 R1 research institution with over 200 different programs. So if you are interested in going to a somewhat larger, probably like medium to larger institution, but want to live in a true small college town, then come join me on Wednesday. So this Wednesday, August 19th at 3:30 p.m. And I'll teach you more about WSU Pullman.
Great. So at this point, we want to see if we have questions. I know we already have some in the hopper, but now's the time. Please feel free to type into that Q&A, and we'll be able to answer some of your questions. And then if there's anything that we don't get to during this session, we'll try to follow up with you after the session. I know there were a number of questions about, is this going to be recorded? Yes, we are recording this session, and I believe we're going to post it on the website where you signed up. But if not, we could follow up with you individually through our spreadsheet of contact information. So one question that I see here is, what about a student on an IEP or an education plan? So do any of our panelists want to talk about some things to consider senior year if you're on an IEP?
Sure. This is a really big topic, and I don't think we have time to dig into it like it needs to be. I think this is something that as you're looking at the college fit, you want to kind of figure out whether the school you're considering is going to be a place you can thrive. There is no such thing as an IEP at the college level, but every school does have some sort of support services for students with disabilities. Typically, I would advise you to go ahead and just apply for admission, and then upon being accepted for admission, then contact the Office of Disability Services to ask how they can help you, and also what documentation you'll have to provide in order to use their services. That's like 1% of what you might want to know. Starting place.
Yeah, thanks, Palmer. So another question we have is, how many colleges should we apply to? I have around 7 to 10, but I see you shorten your list. So I could take that, and then if you guys have anything you would chime in. When you're applying to colleges, you really want to strike the balance. And this is for, more of those traditional four-year universities, not necessarily the for-profit institutions, but more of those traditional non-for-profit institutions, where you want to strategize so that you're applying to schools that are a little bit of a reach, schools that are right on target, and then schools that are pretty likely, that you're very likely to get in. The way that you can determine that information is going on the school's website, first of all, but also reaching out to your admissions counselor when you are more interested in the school and you start developing that relationship to see what their averages were last year. Usually schools will give you the 50% range, like the weighted GPA is maybe a 3.2 to a 3.9, and these were last year's test averages if you decide to submit SATs or if they're required, to get a sense of, okay, so where do I fall within those averages? But then another thing to do is to check with your school counselor, because it's not only how do you compare to the incoming classes averages from that college, but how do your peers compare? Because if there's a lot of students applying to that school from your high school, there's a lot more data, and the bigger the numbers, the more easy it is to predict kind of where you fall. So when you're building that balanced list, you probably want to have at least 2 or 3 of each type of college. You want probably 2 or 3 schools that are pretty likely that you're going to get in, 2 or 3 that are right on target, and maybe 2 or 3 that are a little more of a reach. But the key thing about that distribution is you should like all of those schools. These should all be colleges where you'd be very happy going. It's not about, how hard is it to get in, it's about how good of a fit are you. But that being said, it doesn't hurt to kind of balance your chances. So that's how I would answer that question.
The main things that I would want to throw into just real quickly, on my first slide, I said you're in more control than you realize. We get focused on the highly selective schools in this country. The fact of the matter is most schools are looking for reasons to offer you admission, not reasons to deny you admission. And I'd say, for instance, if you're a solid B student, 80% of the colleges in the country are open to you. So focus on what is right for you rather than what you might be grasping for with different colleges.
Okay, so we have another question. What are the best ways to improve chances of getting admitted? I don't know, Haley, if you want to start us out with that answer.
Yeah, totally. So again, talk to your personal admissions counselor, because they'll be able to tell you exactly the stats and statistics that you need to know for that specific institution. And a lot of the times for a school like me, or for a school like Washington State University, if you are maybe a bubble student where you're not sure if you're going to 100% get accepted, or if you just don't know what your fate's going to be at that school, that's when you're really going to want to connect with your admissions counselor, because then people like us can vouch for you, and discuss with university leadership or whoever makes the decisions for admissions. Like, hey, this is a great student, they're super interested. This is why they had a bad sophomore year, or this is why this happened. So basically we can lay out the XYZ. Now, you're really going to want to focus on your senior year GPA. Don't let the senior slide happen, because that's a huge red flag to all of us, because that shows that now that you're starting to apply to colleges, you don't really care about high school anymore. And a declining GPA is going to affect your GPA, your overall GPA for scholarships, and it's just not going to look great for us in an admissions office. So really keep focusing on your senior year classes, keep pushing hard. And if you need to write an essay, or if you need to write, if you need to answer some questions on the application, don't rush through those. Make sure that someone is proofreading. Maybe even email it to your admissions counselor first, or have someone in your high school preview it, because a lot of the times you don't see grammatical errors because you know what you want it to say. And if we're reading a personal statement that has a bunch of grammatical errors and it doesn't really flow and it doesn't really make sense, that's just not going to look great either. So just make sure that someone is double checking your work, proofreading, all that jazz.
Yeah, I think Haley brings up a really good point that, we're all human, even the people reviewing your applications. And depending on the admissions process, some colleges are very quantitative with their process, meaning, they're really focusing on those numbers about you, your GPA, your test scores, those numerical factors. And with some colleges on one side of the spectrum, it's like, if you meet this criteria, almost like a computer could admit you, and boom, you're in. And there's really not much more to think about. And then all the way on the other side of the spectrum, you have colleges that do a very holistic admissions review, meaning they're looking at sometimes dozens of factors that have various weights to try to determine if you'd be a good fit for that institution. But I would say, regardless of the process, I think one thing that you're hearing a lot from us is reach out to your admissions counselor, because over 50% of the colleges in this country admit the majority of students. So it's not like all of the colleges are like Princeton or Harvard or that kind of thing and are incredibly, competitive to get into. And so I think the majority of admissions counselors around the country are more advocates for you, and they want to find reasons to admit you, than they are like a gatekeeper or that kind of thing. And so give us reasons to push for you. You can't really change a lot of the things that happened in the past. You can't change that C you got sophomore year. If you had a disciplinary infraction or something like that, you can't change those things, but you do have control over how you frame the story, how you reach out and make relationships with your school counselor, with your admissions counselors, how much time, as Kaylee mentioned, you take with the essay. Did you really take your time on it? Not if it's due at midnight, not submitting it at 11:52, but really having that time to sit with it and edit it. If the college allows you to do an interview, even if they're not required, but there's an option to do one, if it's on your top list, you should always do one, because all of these things are going to give you that little bit of an edge, and we would highly recommend doing. So another question we have is, do you recommend getting in contact with alumni or staff to get a feel for the school, especially since there are no campus visits?
The one comment I would make about this, I think it is a good idea, but particularly when you're talking with alumni, recognize that colleges do change over time. And so if you're talking to an alum who graduated 20 or 30 years ago, they may describe to you a school that's very different from what it is today, for better or worse. So you're probably better off talking to maybe recent alumni, students, and current staff. But it is a great idea.
Absolutely. We have another question. What is the difference between early action 1, early action 2, and early decision? So really the 1 and 2 are not so much of the difference. Those are really just a difference in dates. It's really the difference between early action and early decision. So early action is not binding. So if let's say the early action deadline is November 1 or November 15, you apply, and then a few weeks later to a couple months later, depending on when the school releases their decisions, if they release them on a rolling basis or if they release them by a certain date. But essentially, you're going to get your decision, and you're going to have several months until May 1 to make that final commitment. If you apply early decision, you're really entering into a contractual obligation with your counselor, the university, and your family to really say, if you are admitted, you're going to rescind your offers of admission from all of the other colleges, and you're going to commit to going to that school. So early decision, just think about it, you're making a decision, it's binding. And most schools that offer early decision usually will offer early action. If the school is very much for you. It's a nice way to kind of show them that interest earlier on. Colleges that offer early decision typically are admitting students at a much higher rate. For example, Whitman in Washington is known for being pretty selective overall, but if you apply early decision, your chances probably more than double of being admitted. But you are making that commitment. You're making that contractual obligation, essentially. So it's something to weigh out and discuss with your admissions counselor, your college counselor, and really ask yourself, would I be willing to commit fully now at this point and say no to everybody else? Let's see. How is the admissions process different as a freshman versus transfer? For example, if you're transferring from a community college. I don't know, Palmer, if you want to take that or.
Yeah, that's, these almost every question y'all are asking will depend a little bit from university to university. So that's the first thing to know. How does the process vary? It varies so much, just depending on the school. I almost don't know if I can answer that for you.
One question that I get a lot.
Sorry.
Oh no, it's fine. One thing that I hear a lot from students is, and I don't know if you would agree, Palmer, is they'll ask, what does it mean to be a transfer student? What does that status mean? And I know, at least with my university, and I think a lot of others, if just because you take some college classes in high school, that doesn't make you a transfer student. But once you hit your graduation date from high school, or you get that GED, the second that you do that, if you take one more college class after that point, then for most colleges, you'd be a transfer status. And the amount of credits you need to graduate and the amount of time it takes to graduate, the amount of money that you're paying, if you need to live on campus, all of those things are going to be potentially different requirements if you're a transfer student or an incoming freshman. I know at my college, for example, if you're required to live on campus if you're a first year student, but if you're a transfer student, that you no longer have that requirement. So that could be a difference of thousands of dollars in housing and that sort of thing.
And this isn't universal, but often first year students are eligible for more generous scholarships than transfer students are.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you did dual enrollment in high school at a community college, where would you put that on the common application? So when you're filling out the common application, there will be a section to list the classes that you're currently enrolled in. And so I believe there will be a way for you to sort of indicate that that's at a college level. Usually your high school is also going to provide a school profile, and they will typically say students enrolled in dual enrollment, Head Start, early learning, whatever it's called in your region, are taking that level of class. So hopefully that answers that question. What is the process of accepting and deferring? And and can you do that if you do early decision? So Haley, I don't know if you want to take that one.
Totally. So first, it's important to talk with that admissions office and your admissions counselor to see if that school allows you to defer in acceptance. So traditionally, Washington State University does not offer deferrals. And if you will not be attending WSU during the academic year that you were accepted, then you would simply need to reapply. However, there are some schools that will allow you to defer, and it could be just a simple form that you would fill out with their admissions office. It could be something as elaborate as, having to talk to the director and explaining why you want to defer. And then you're also going to have to think about the scholarships involved, because there are some institutions where you can defer, but your scholarships will not defer with you. So it's going to be different for every single school, and you're really going to want to connect with your admissions counselor to see what the process is at that institution, and be sure to ask about your scholarships, because you don't want to defer and then lose your scholarships with that school. So got to keep that in mind.
Okay, so I think at this point, we're almost at the end of the hour. I think we probably have time for one more question, but if your question wasn't answered, we're gonna try to follow up with you after the presentation. I believe we'll have a list, and then you can also send us an email. The website is admissionzero.com and all of our contact information is listed there. But so let's see if we do one more question.
Choose an easy one, Nick.
Yeah, let's see. Does the order you put your activities matter on the application?
No.
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely quality over quantity. So, you know, if you've done 20 activities in high school, but a few of them were just a bake sale here and there or a couple day activity, you know, you want to pick the activities that are the most meaningful to you. Choose the highest, the biggest impact activities on your life, put them there. Colleges appreciate consistency, so we like to see a few years of that activity if you have things like that, if you've taken leadership roles. The order I wouldn't say matters as much, just that you are choosing the most important ones to you, and also that you're describing them in a way that people understand. Try to stay away from acronyms. Most people understand that SGA means Student Government Association, but maybe not everyone, so maybe type out that full name. And that's another reason to consider doing a resume now in the summer, because you can start thinking about what are those most meaningful activities, how do I want to order them, how do I want to describe them, so it'll make filling out that section of the Common App a lot quicker. Anything else you guys would add?
Ditto.
No? Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for participating tonight. We had a lot of fun. We had so many great questions. And as I said before, go to admissionzero.com. You can find the other sessions this week. You can find our contact information. But we wish you the best of luck in this process. You're all going to do fine. You're going to get into the college of your dreams. And we're so excited to see you go throughout this process. Hopefully you'll apply to some of our schools. So thank you all very much and enjoy the rest of your night.
Bye, everyone.